Welcome to an exclusive FMI learning event. The Financial Management Institute is the leading source in Canada for professional development in new and emerging trends, best practices, and topical issues related to public sector financial management. We're a nationwide organization that has expanded over the years to include provincial and municipal public sector perspective in our numerous chapters all across Canada.
The FMI delivers a comprehensive program of learning and professional development through various events such as seminars, workshops, webinars, and publications. As an industry-leading organization, the FMI is able to attract leaders and experts who regularly contribute to the FMI learning experience. Whether it's our flagship learning events, a regional session across Canada, a monthly interactive webinar, or any of our publications, the FMI provides a venue for these partners to communicate their knowledge and experience.
The integrity and the reputation of the FMI brand allows for premium networking opportunities. Our members and attendees are able to raise their profile and take advantage of connections and contacts with industry experts and individuals in their field of interest.
Today's FMI is the result of contribution of many volunteers, individuals like you and I who decided to get involved. Listen to some of the benefits that our volunteers have experienced from their time with the FMI.
The benefits of volunteering are professional and personal.
The networking, meeting with people.
You couldn't ask for a better contact in making contacts and learning as to what's going on.
It affords volunteers great exposure.
Definitely it will improve your leadership capacity.
A lot of learning opportunities.
But mostly it's the people.
Go ahead and get involved because you couldn't ask for a better asset on your resume as well.
In order to continue our growth and renewal, we're constantly seeking to engage members in our community.
If you are interested in growing your own career, working with dynamic people, while at the same time giving back to the community, then you should consider volunteering with the FMI.
Speak to one of the organizers or visit the volunteer section of our website for more information. Enjoy your exclusive FMI learning event and join us in striving for excellence in public sector financial management.
I'd like to welcome everybody here to our next in our series of PPX learning events. This one, input, output, performance, and advances in costing. So I am one of the two co-presidents of PPX, and we are delighted to see such good attendance. When I'm not doing my PPX role, I also moonlight as a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, where I look after the finance effectiveness practice. So, we would like to welcome very much our guests. Today it's a bit of a unique event for us, so we've got all of you folks in the room, but we also are collaborating with the FMI folks this morning, and we've got a webinar going. So we've got about 40 to 45 people participating with us through web. And for those of you who are whining and weaning about getting here for 8 o'clock in the morning, we've got folks on the phone from Calgary, or online from Calgary, and from British Columbia, so those folks are in their PJs and drinking coffee, I think, as they're participating in the webinar. So we'd like to wish a warm welcome to everybody, whether you're in the room or online. So what's going to happen this morning is, so I am delighted to be your moderator, which means you'll see me a couple of times. So we will have a couple of speakers. So first, to kick us off will be Mike Haley. Mike is the president of Landmark Decisions. They are a niche consulting firm that focuses on results-based management, costing, and so forth. And Mike is going to kick it off just with, I'll say, a kind of foundational piece, talking on basic concepts of business process costing, how they can be applied to the development of your better cost and efficiency indicator information. Then we're going to get into our first case study, and that will be presented by Stephen Eng, who is the Director of Corporate Resource Management Services at Health Canada. Stephen, as many of you may know, is a veteran in the public service, and particularly in Health Canada. He's been there for 17 years through a variety of positions, and he's going to talk to us about how Health Canada has been managing its costing with respect to cabinet submissions, project costings, setting of service fees. So I think that will be very, very valuable. We will then take a Q&A session for a little bit of time. We will, because there's 2 Q&A sessions, we're going to give priority in the first one to our folks participating on the webinar. But if time permits, we will also take questions from the floor. Then we will have a short break where you can, again, fill your plates, fill your coffee cups. I'll be the first one over there. And we will come back to hear from our second case study, and that will be presented to us by Jean-René Drapeau, who is the Director of Business Improvement Services at the Canadian Intellectual Property Office, and Christian Bergeron, who is the Deputy Director, Costing, Performance, and Managerial Accounting, also at CIPO. And they're going to talk about how at CIPO they've been implementing activity-based management and how that has been of value to them in strategic costing. And we will, at that point, invite all of the speakers up for a bit of a Q&A panel type session. We should have you out here by 11. But if, what you'll find is that if, you have further questions, often our speakers are ready to stick around for a few minutes afterwards. So I think that's kind of about it. Mike, I'll invite you to come up and set the stage and kick us off.
Great.
Technologically challenged. Maybe just slide.
There you go. Great. Good morning. Thanks very much, Lori, and thanks to PPX and FMI for the opportunity to speak. For those of you who know me, you know I'm from Halifax, and I'm really pleased to be here while my wife snow blows my 40 centimeters of snow out of my driveway. So as Lori said, I'm going to provide kind of the base, the foundational aspects that I think some of our later speakers will build off of. Our agenda for this short half hour is look at some of the cost drivers around developing cost information, why it's becoming more and more important. We'll get into talking about efficiency and efficiency indicators, although that's not necessarily the prime focus. We'll talk about activity-based planning and activity-based costing. And then I want to make some linkages to some processes and business management techniques like Lean and Six Sigma that you may have been hearing about. And I know we've had numerous sessions before, both PPX and others, on Lean. So we'll do that, and we'll actually wind up doing that like pizza in about 30 minutes or less. So that's why I call it the rapid ride. And my speaking colleagues, when we shared our information, they go, "Wow, you're really going to jam that all into 30 minutes?" So I said, "Well, I'm going to download an app and keep myself honest on that. So I am going to start my app. I know I've already taken a minute, so I'll try to keep this on track and short and snappy and so on. So I'd like to start with Dilbert. So I don't know if that's actually the reason why Parliamentary Budget Office and the Costing Centre of Expertise has been set up, but I have my suspicions. We need to improve costing, and that's not just public sector, private sector as well. Drivers from that start right at the top, right from Blueprint 2020, Destination 2020. There's lots of focus now on improving the efficiency, streamlining processes, making life easier for the public service, and improving the quality and time delivery of services and programs. Those of you who are faithful PPXers will be intimately familiar with MRRS, and really the aims of that with regard to, in 2012, the efficiency indicators being introduced into the PMF, the Performance Measurement Framework, were around improving delivery costs, understanding trends and how costs can be hopefully changed and business processes can be improved and so on. Now, I know EIs and efficiency indicators have been a struggle for departments and agencies and probably indeed Treasury Board itself as far as providing guidance and leadership in that area. And it's an evolution. I think we're all evolving in that direction together. The other, whoops, wrong way. The other major component of driving costs is the evaluation community. The policy on evaluation in 2008-2009 laid out a number of components around effectiveness, efficiency, and economy. So by definition, effectiveness is, the extent to which the program achieves its outcomes. That's sort of the output to outcome relationship. Efficiency is looking at resources and how those resources, i.e. inputs, tie out to the outputs. And then economy is all around, are we using the right resources? Are we using them well? So efficiency and economy ties directly to costing, as we'll see. One of the core issues in the evaluation directive is understanding resource utilization. So what is resource utilization about? It's around looking at how your inputs, so your people, your equipment, your outsourced services, contractors, consultants, facilities, all are needed to deliver on your outputs. And do you have the right mix? How effectively are you using them? Is there extra capacity in that resource base to handle more work? And then a little bit about the efficiency by which those resources are consumed. So this was from a paper at CEE, the evaluation community in Canada, that presented concepts around that resource utilization. Some of the tools that are used to help us understand resource utilization are logic models. Everybody, I'm sure, is familiar with the concept of logic models. They provide the high-level view of input to output and ultimately output to outcomes. Theories of change, which I always consider kind of an advanced aspect of logic modeling. And the last one is business process mapping. And I'm going to spend some time talking about business process mapping, because I think it's a key element in understanding not just the operational aspects, but the financial aspects of the business. So, logic models. Again, I'm sure people are familiar, output to outcome. The input, the operational part of your business, the program delivery, the service delivery, is really around what we call the planned work. So if you're doing operational work planning, you're looking at inputs to outputs. What do I need? What dollars, what people, and whatever do I need? And how am I going to work to achieve those outputs? Okay? And you can detail that by doing business process mapping. How many folks in the room have done some business process mapping? Okay, so more than half. Okay, so you're familiar with the concepts. And the real key is looking at activities, understanding your activities at a fundamental level and how they consume resources. So I like this slide and I like this quote. It's from Michael Porter in his book Competitive Advantage in 1985. Activities are the atoms of strategic advantage. I kind of like that quote because, like Stephen, our next speaker, we're both chemists. And so atoms are very important. So I figure that's maybe why I moved from chemistry into business management, things like that, understanding activities. This is nothing new. Peter Drucker, considered one of the founding fathers of the new business management era in the 50s, started talking about questions only being answered by analyzing the activities that are needed to attain objectives, i.e. activities to outputs to outcomes. So activity definition, you know, something like, you know, almost projects, they have a beginning and an end, they consume resources, they can consume other activities, so we have the concept of direct and indirect activities. They ultimately support some sort of output, and are usually described in a kind of action-oriented, so, you know, processing applications, creating reports, what have you. All right, so this is my, I call it my money slide. It's probably the most detailed slide. It's probably the one that's going to be most challenging for Andre to keep up with on the webinar, because we've got lots of builds here. This was actually based on some EI workshopping we did at Health Canada, so it's sort of an illustration from Health Canada around regulatory aspects of healthy products and food branch. So it starts basically, you know, what are the program or the client needs? Outputs. In this case, a subset of this is doing inspections and doing assessments. All right? And with each time we define an output or an activity or a resource, we need to give it a unit of measure. How would we measure the inspections? Number of inspections, makes sense. Assessments, number of assessments. At the activity level, 3 activities. Again, this is just an illustrative model. So we have site visits, we have support calls, and we have surveys, again, measured by the number of. And then at the input or the resource level, we can have a variety of resources. So we can have our workforce, our labor, we can have some equipment, specialized equipment that may be used, let's say, in the inspection processes. We may have some contractors that we use. We may have a facility. And really what we're trying to do is understand the flow, the relationships between those layers of our business. And operational flow is really driven, we call it demand driven. It's from the bottom up. So the program of the client demands are going to dictate how many inspections and assessments we do, which will then dictate how much activity we need to have, which will then dictate how the resources need to be supplied to meet those demands. Right, so it's driven from the bottom up. If we go through that process, it's a rich environment now for establishing different types of efficiency indicators. Okay, so by types we can say we have time-based, so we could look at things like the cycle time. So how long does it take the assessment process? How many assessments can we do in a week, in a month, or whatever? That could be considered an efficiency indicator. We can also have efficiency indicators which we call process-based. So at each node where we have a connection point, shall we say, between an activity, an output, a resource, and an activity, we now can define kind of a factor, a consumption rate. So in this case, we're looking at that point, which would be, let's say, the number of site visits per inspection. So different clients, different products may have different requirements for how many inspections will be required. So the number of inspections the number of visits per inspection could be considered an efficiency indicator. Could we change that in some regard? And as we move up the chain, same thing now, we're looking at here the amount of equipment as it measured in equipment hours per the visit. Could we impact on how that equipment is used in the activity level? Right, so those are, I'll call them microscopic or maybe atomic efficiency indicators around specific points in that business process. At the top, we get back to this discussion about resources, we really need to understand how much capacity we have in our resource base. Okay? And the capacity then gets deployed across those different needs, i.e. the activities. And we now have, if we can capture some of the data, the operational data, i.e. number of inspections, how long it takes to do an inspection, how many visits that we do to support that inspection zone, we can actually calculate from the bottom up and determine what the actual requirement is, and as a result we can come up with a utilization number. How well are we using that resource? What's the effective utilization of that resource for the demand load, for the workload that we actually have. Okay, so different types of efficiency indicators around the operational and business process. So that fits in, I think you may have all seen, if those of you dealing in the efficiency indicator world, TBS's kind of spectrum of efficiency indicators, and kind of at the lower end are kind of the proxies, and let's get started with some ideas, and then we move up to kind of a time focus, and then ultimately cost is where we want to go. I kind of like to think there's another layer in there around process, around business process. So that's what we've just described. But ultimately we do want to move towards, if we can, or when we can, probably more likely, move to a cost focus. So what are some of the options around cost focus? Yeah, I just want to give you some references. And again, one of the reasons when I was challenged by my speaking colleagues of why I had so many slides, I mean, this material will be available on the PPX site probably within the next day or so. It's available, I think, on the FMI site right now and things like that. So I'd like to kind of give folks some references. If you're looking for additional information, it's kind of embedded in that presentation. How many folks have heard of Dr. Robert Kaplan? Okay. Oh, wow, pretty much everybody. And what is he most known for? Balanced scorecard, correct. Before, however, he got into the balanced scorecard with Peter Norton, that would have been about the early 90s time frame. He was considered one of the founding fathers of the activity-based costing movement. Okay, so in this book, which came out in 1998, it was really quite a probably the best book in my mind, because it talked about things like operational management, i.e. doing things right. So understanding the business process, how to reduce costs, how to become more efficient, working capacity management, those things that we talked about just in that previous money slide. But it also talked about doing the right things. So it did not lose focus that there's no sense being really efficient at things if you're going in the wrong direction. Okay, so we must maintain that output to outcome understanding, but we need to tie the input to output together with that. So that's the key. We need the full spectrum. So that's a great book if you're looking for reference material. Evolution of cost management. So prior to ABC, and actually prior to people applying ABC concepts, because people still do a lot of allocation, high-level allocation. Here's my cost pool, here's this cost center or whatever, and I'm going to drive this down to whatever my outputs are based on volume or some arbitrary driver. Right? And that's really the broad, very broad brush. I kind of put peanut butter on the toast. Okay. So ABC, there's two actually distinct approaches to ABC. The most common, and usually the first effort people will make or organizations will make into activity-based costing is what we call the top-down. Sometimes it's called the push methodology, because you're pushing costs down through the business process. You're still looking at activities, so you're understanding one of those activities, and you're using those activities as kind of cost collectors. And then those activities then get distributed down to the output based on how the business process works. Okay, what I've shown here is a simple two-stage allocation. In reality, it's multiple stages, because you're going to have activities that support other activities. So, anything like doing maintenance would support maybe a piece of equipment or the facility or whatever is an indirect activity that would support the direct activity touching the output. So it's going to get a little bit more typically complicated than that, but certainly way better than this broad brush allocation. The most advanced or more advanced approach is sometimes what we call the bottom-up or demand-driven, or sometimes it's called the pull, okay? Because it works in two stages. We actually lay out the business process model, and like the detailed slide I showed you previously, we calculate the flow, the operational flow based on demand volumes, based on activity efficiencies and consumption rates, and determine the resources that are needed. and then we lay in the cost on those resources, and we pull those dollars back down through that model based on the established flow. So the operation, the way the business is done, will actually dictate how those dollars get bounced down through the process. Some of the advantages of this approach are that it brings in the concept of resource utilization. If you don't do that, there is a high risk that you will assume you have enough resource if you want to extend the activities or the outputs and so on. So this brings in that operational boundary of resource constraints. Okay. So think of activity-based costing as your programs, your services, your customers moving along a conveyor belt. They're going to collect and cost what we call directly traceable, things that immediately support that output or that customer or client. And then you have all of these indirect costs, which you actually understand how they're used, the activities, and then how they ultimately flow down to the outputs. All right. And if you think about indirect costs in your environment, all the things that happen, around management and client support, HR, all these internal service groups, and so on, that is a big bucket of dollars. Okay, and the public sector, government services, and things that can exceed over 80%. Okay? So if we don't understand those indirect costs and how they get attributed down to our outputs, we can get misleading information about the real cost of delivery. It also provides us a different view of our cost information. So this would be the standard view you would get on a monthly basis. Here's how much I spent in private sector we call it P&L, profit and loss statement. So here's all my charter accounts and how much money I spent against my budget. Okay, and again, tremendous focus on managing the budget, managing the dollars, but less focus on how those dollars actually apply to the work that's being done. So if you take an ABC view, it doesn't change the dollars, it just gives you a different perspective. So it actually, in the purchasing department, would tell us, how much did we spend on certifying new vendors, on issuing POs, on processing, on releases around supply arrangements or standing offers or whatever. Okay, so now we start to see the operational aspect come together with costing. We can still drill down into any of those major activities and sort of get a P&L statement for each element. And then from there, we can actually do comparative analysis. So we can actually start looking at how well we're doing against other divisions, how well we're doing against other departments, look for best practices, and how we're going to maybe improve the process. So it gives you that more detailed information to move on. There is some good work out there. Treasury Board in 2008 came out with a guide to costing. I suspect that there's probably some work now. The new Center for Costing Expertise probably maybe evolving that. But this was really, in my mind, a great document because it adopted a lot of the ABC concepts, and it had a distinct approach. It had actually a 7-step methodology that needed to be applied. It looked at things like what we call the cost base. What are you going to include in your cost analysis? It talked about direct and indirect costs and being able to tag and manage those. And it also talked about different, what they call cost behaviors. So looking at fixed costs and how do you attribute fixed costs, like costs you just cannot get rid of on a monthly, annual basis. They're there. Okay, so salaried labor, internal labor is a fixed cost. Variable costs, consultants could be considered variable, come and go as needed. And then semi-variable, so something that has a step in it that you go over a certain level, you need to add more resource. So all of those components, which are all key components of activity-based costing, included that. So I'd encourage you to kind of delve through the document, look at that from a costing point of view. Okay, so back to our business process model. Always now, if we've gone through that process, all we need to do now is understand how those dollars get attributed to resources. And that's, I won't say totally easy, but it's easier than developing the operational information. There's no doubt about that. So we can lay that in, and then we basically pull those dollars back down through the process. And from that, we can start to look at cost-based efficiency indicators. And we can look at our cost per unit of work, so the cost for each of our maybe major activities. We could look at the cost of our outputs, and we could look even at the cost of servicing each of our customer or customer types. Okay, because we're pulling that down, and we can capture that information at the appropriate point in our model. So laying out these business process models, doing business process mapping is key. And I'll leave that for you to look at your leisure, but it can apply now not just to financial management, but to operational management, strategic management, client management. There's lots of uses if you can get that detailed information about your business processes. Back to the doing things right and doing the right things. So business process modeling, mapping, allows you to do things right. Okay, and linking that through your logic models, through your output to outcome, allows you to understand that relationship, and that's really key. Okay, because when we talk about performance, and in your PMF and in your program logic models and performance measurement strategies, and we develop performance indicators, we've all had experience of that, and then we have to go and do target setting. How many folks actually do target setting with resource planning in mind? I'm impressed. Good for you. Okay, very few do, as we saw. And to achieve a target, to move a result value towards an expected result, we probably need to understand those resources. Because if we don't, we may be fooling ourselves around those targets. So this gives us an opportunity to at least begin to ask the right questions. Again, for those of you who know me, you know I'm a big advocate of the use of technology in business management. Be that dashboards, scorecarding, it's the same in costing. You need tools to be able to go through the process, and more importantly, to be able to communicate the process. I won't take you through the whole value chain here, but you'll see squarely in the center the catalyst that drives both of these cycles is the use of technology. Technology improves the quality of the information because now people can touch it, see it, ask questions about it, and it improves the organizational understanding of how that information can be used. So in different types of costing technology, they're generally considered under what Gartner, who are kind of one of the leading IT think tanks, would call corporate performance management. Okay? And it's a line item there called profitability modeling and optimization. Okay, Gartner's catering more to the private sector with that, obviously, but it could be called cost modeling because we talk about activity-based costing, constraint-based, predictive modeling, whatever. It can be applied to any business, anything where there's a business process. Okay. Gartner also does an evaluation of different types of technologies. And the good news is the ones that are in this upper right-hand quadrant, which are considered the vendors that have the best vision around corporate performance management and the best ability to execute, so in the upper right, are all players here in town, in the federal government anyway. So Oracle, SAP, IBM, and to, I guess, a lesser degree, although still with good ability to execute, is SAS. And this slide just shows you some illustrations, and here's where the value of the technology comes in, is not necessarily calculating the numbers. And if you're doing the activity-based costing, the number one tool for costing it would be Excel, of course, worldwide. All right. What Excel won't give you, though, is the visualization around cost development. Okay, so tools like Oracle, like SAS, Decimal is one that's not in the CPM quadrant. It's a small Montreal-based company. Do a lot of extensive work in the public sector in Quebec. Have some work here with shared services, PW, Costa have used their technology. But the real important thing is being able to see visually that process model and how the costs step through that process model. Because now operational managers can understand their cost development and things like that. Lori's waving her hand, but I got 6 minutes. All right, so I'm going to finish up by talking about lean. Okay, how many people have initiatives, activities away in lean in their organizations? Okay, so about 10, so about 20%. Lean is a kind of a new concept. It's mentioned in Destination 2020. The secretary from Treasury Board took 10 DMs by the hand and took them out to Saskatchewan. The province of Saskatchewan have been living the lean story for about 4 or 5 years. So lean is coming to a theater near you, I can guarantee you, and there's lots of initiatives underway now. And what is lean? Lean is really about understanding waste and reducing or eliminating waste in the business process. Okay. And so we talk about value and non-value added. Of all the work that we do day to day, what adds distinct value to our output, ultimately to our client, the citizen, our stakeholders. And this is average, and this is average across public and private sector as well. But 90% of the work that is done is non-value added, i.e. really the customer doesn't care and ultimately wouldn't like to pay for that. So how can we identify that and how can we ultimately reduce that? These slides actually come from a company called Lean Agility, who I partner with. And I really like this one slide. If you had a file, and think of it, we all deal with files, whether they be physical files or files of our work, and you looked at, put a camera on that file and kind of recorded what happened to that file over time, what would happen? When would it go forward? When would it stop? When would it go backwards? Okay. And you think about all the things that happen to that file. And the big one is waiting, and waiting and more waiting. So the file that literally stops for extended periods of time in someone's inbox waiting to get processed and so on. So understanding where those interruptions occur and trying to eliminate and reduce those can streamline the business process. So there is a concept called value stream mapping. For those who've been down the lean journey, I'm sure you'll be familiar with that. Usually involves a lot of whiteboarding and stickies and so on. It's really around understanding your business process. And it's not just, the siloed business process, it's the complete, stakeholder view of the world, the whole value chain. And again, I won't get into that, the reference is provided there, but where business process mapping comes in and where costing can be utilized in this is if we think about each of these activities, these major activities, and look at our resource inputs. Similar to what we did with our inspections and assessments, we can now start to understand what resources, what the capacities are, what the costs are for each of those. And as we make improvements in the business process, we can actually, hopefully, see lower costs to deliver and understand those costs. So the two have a nice marriage point, and mapping, visualization techniques, and so on are very, very key in doing all of that. Six Sigma, folks that have some Government of New Brunswick, for example, for those of you who were with us at our annual symposium last year, you would have heard Jane Washburn talk about Lean Six Sigma and what it's done for the Government of New Brunswick. Six Sigma is all about improving consistency, all right? So it's reducing errors in business process, typically used in highly reproducible, high volume business processes, okay? And why it's important, if we only stopped at a four sigma level of quality, this would mean some pretty dramatic issues. Lost mail, although we probably argue that may be a good target. No electricity for 7 hours a month. I mean, that gives you the area of magnitude of what Sigma is all about. And again, it's all about improving consistency. So Lean helps you improve the efficiency of flow, and Six Sigma helps you improve the consistency of those results and your ability to repeat that on a regular basis. So marrying those together can really really give you the best benefit. Think of Six Sigma as a tool to help you implement Lean. So some of the typical government results in applying Lean, 25 to 100% increase in capacity without really working harder or adding more resources, because you're eliminating waste, you're freeing up resource to do additional work and be more efficient at that. So obviously that can have an impact on financial performance, because you can get more volume through with the same resources, and do it in a manner where people aren't taxed. It's actually easier for them to do it. It's done right. It's easier for them to do. So some examples of public sector entities here in Canada that have used this. We talked about Government of Saskatchewan, Government of Brunswick, Government of British Columbia. So a lot of provinces are further ahead, certainly in the Lean journey than the feds are right now. And of course, I can't miss that we have our colleagues from CIPO who will be speaking after our morning break. Maybe they can make, I know Jean René was here about a year ago and gave a talk on Lean, so maybe they make some connections around costing and Lean for us today too. So. All right. In my clock, I'm finished with 1 minute to spare, so I did it. I'll leave you with this one last billboard. And we all thought the pointy-haired boss was the dumb guy, right? I mean, that's what Scott Adams portrays him to be, but I challenge to say that he's pretty smart in this case, because it actually can help, and it helps you make your objectives. So. Okay, I'm going to turn the stage over to Stephen. We'll do a Q&A after Stephen's presentation, so if you have some questions for me, just hold those for now. And let me get Stephen's presentation up and invite him up. Great.
All right, so thank you, folks. Now that the professor has spoken, I just want you to think that not all chemists are windy.
Thanks,
He's from
Dave.
the East Coast, I'm from Southern Ontario. And I'm not going to do much about theory here. I'm going to talk more about our experience at Health Canada with respect to our experience in costing. And I'll apologize, my expert, who should be here doing it, Robin Chu, decided to escape Ottawa, doesn't like the -20. He's off in Honduras building homes and doing some humanitarian work, Habitat for Humanity, so good for him. So I hope he's enjoying the warm weather. We should have, if we figured this out, done a webinar and got him in Honduras to do the presentation, but you're stuck with me. And also, having taught in university, hopefully everybody will be able to hear me, so I have no problem screaming at a crowd of 300 engineers. So bear with me here. First of all, I just want to give you a little taste of what Health Canada is about. We're not a large department, we're not a small department. So, you know, we're about 9,000 FTEs, translates into about close to 10,000 live warm bodies across the country. In terms of resources, we're just under $3.7 billion. We're not a DND, but we're not a really tiny place either. And it's sort of, I'll give you sort of an idea of, you know, how we spend that money out of the $3.7 billion. About $2 billion, that would be your operating dollars, your salary, and your operating dollars. We have a large amount of contributions. About 1.6 billion of that is contributions. Still a little louder? Okay, how's that? Okay. And then we have a very small amount of capital, but we have $30 million in capital that we tend to spend in the department. We're geographically dispersed throughout the country. We're in the NCR. We have 8 regions across the country, so we're spread out. And we have, I'll show you the next couple of slides, our PAA. We have 3 strategic outcomes and internal services. So we do a variety of things. The guys later on who in the patent office I think they're sort of, more unique. You have a sort of, I'll call it sort of one business line in my mind, but when you see our PAA, you'll understand here. So there's part of our PAA. Those are two of the strategic outcomes. The first one deals with, and I'm sorry it's small, if you go on our Health Canada website, you'll find it. I had a much less light artistic version when I first drafted it. Mike found it on our website, I was looking for it. Anyway, here's what it is. The first one deals with the health system, right? So we have things like the guys who deal with the Canada Health Act. We have official languages for the health system. We have specialized health services. So that's the first one. The second one is what most people, I think, associate with Health Canada. It's our regulatory guys. So we have 3 regulatory branches that deal with healthy environments, health products and food, pesticides, and then we have a regional sort of operation that delivers all of that. This is the one that most people don't know about, SO3, Strategic Outcome 3. It's our First Nations in Inuit Health. And really out of our $3.7 billion, about 2/3 of that is for First Nations Inuit Health. So for those of you who don't know what they do, think of them as one of the things they do in there. You'll see in, let's see, the middle of that, if you can see it, it says supplementary health benefits for First Nations. So we pay for their drugs, we pay for their dental, we pay for their eyeglasses, we pay for their transportation to get them from northern communities to get their services. And that's a large percentage of our work. So you see from our PAA, and of course we have internal services. I'm showing the sort of the current old view, next year changes in terms of the buckets there. There's 3 buckets of internal services, going to go to 10. But as you see from the PAA, Health Canada does a lot of things. We do the regulatory stuff, we do the health system stuff, and we do the First Nation stuff. So it's really, when you talk about costing, it's costing different aspects of business, and they're each one's a little bit different. If you talk about the regulatory stuff, what Mike has just done in terms of costing, he gave you some of the stuff from the Health Products and Food Branch. It's a lot easier to cost that than it would be to cost something for First Nations. And I'll talk a bit more about that when we talk about these sort of 4 sort of reasons why we do costing. So before we move on, I'd like to talk a bit about the history of the costing function at Health Canada. We've gone through a bit of a journey at one point. I've been in the department since 1997. I would say up to about the mid-2000s, the revenue costing group within Health Canada, they were pretty strong and robust. We had about, I'll say about 10 FTEs at that time. And they did a lot of things when we sort of had that much horsepower. So we did things like developing our own sort of Health Canada policies and guidelines on costing, very much in line with the TPS policies, the 2008 policy that Mike had mentioned. We did participate in a lot of activities. We had a working group that dealt with user fees, and I sat on that for a short time. And then we developed what we call the corporate cost allocation model. So one of the things that's key for costing is to figure out some of that internal services cost. The corporate cost allocation model was our way of, as we're developing cost, what is the cost of internal services? And I'll talk more about that later. So that was up to about mid-2000, and I would say from the mid-2000s until recently, about 2014, we sort of lost capacity in that function. It sort of dwindled to about almost 2 or 3 FTEs until recently. And a lot of that had to do with, I think, we all been through the sort of thinning out of government, and of course the easiest parts to thin out would have been the internal service, what people considered overhead. I mean, costing, we sort of thought we had it under control, and all these guys were doing when they had about 2 or 3 FTEs were just maintaining this corporate cost allocation model. It's all they were really doing. Fast forward to 2014, we sort of had a bit of a shake-up, both in the government and within Health Canada. We are reorganized a bit because, through the famous Economic Action Plan, or the DRAP, we've all thinned out, we've sort of shaken things up, reorganized. Revenue and costing came from a different group within the Chief Financial Officer branch to where I am at now. has become part of my group. And now we've gone from 2 to sort of 5 FTEs. So we're getting back there, but we're chasing after the same pool as many other government departments are. And of course, at the center at TBS, where they have the Center of Expertise on Costing, a lot of the best guys went there first. So we're all fighting for that same pool. Okay, so there's 4 reasons why we would be interested in doing costing at Health Canada. So I'll go through it in this order. We're going to talk about the costing of investment project proposals. We have the costing of cabinet submissions, the costing of internal services, which applies to a lot of things, and then the setting of user fees. So I'll go to each one of those sort of reasons for costing and sort of give you our experience and our challenges that we've experienced with going through costing, particularly in the environment we're in now, with a real focus on shrinking costs and doing for the least amount possible. So investment planning. So every department should have an investment plan. It's in policy. You're supposed to have an investment plan that Treasury Board looks at. Not necessarily, they'll say they don't approve it, but they do look at it and sort of give you a blessing that you're on the right track. You're using your own resources to do investments. And in Health Canada, a lot of our investments are tied to improving processes, transforming, but they really sort of break down into 2 really big categories for us. One would be IT-related investment projects where we're trying to do something in the system, tweak a system, build a new system. And the other one would be real property. Those are the 2 biggest things. And we find challenges with the investment planning. The experience that senior management has of investment planning is that things aren't well costed. So taking some simple examples on that IT front, sure, it's really more or less simple enough to figure out the cost of building a system, that direct cost, but a lot of times we tend to forget when we do costing. There's a life cycle approach there, and one of the things that we always struggle with when people present that is, okay, it costs you X number of dollars to build that, how much does it cost to maintain it? And so that's a very important thing that people tend to forget. And when the lights go on and they say, well, it only costs X number of dollars to produce it, but it's a gift that keeps on giving, management decisions sometimes change a bit once they realize that. The other thing with real property is, I think for them, costing is a lot easier to sort of come to a cost. Their biggest challenge is scheduling and trying to deliver it on time. A lot of times we hear, because real property, PWGSC kind of has a bit of a monopoly within the government. They provide the services, and while we could go outside, I think a lot of times that's where we got to go to first. We hear a lot of times on the real property side when things don't happen as per plan, it's because PWGSC delays and then the cost change, the cost profile changes. So what do we see in terms of what people need in costing of investment plan projects? Well, certainly guidance is required. We hear a lot of times that we don't have the tools, and when they say tools to do the costing, people refer to, I need a template. And that's great, we can provide templates, to say, it's this, and that. You should consider, how many bodies at this group and level do you need? Do you need consultants? Do you need whatever it is? You can do all that. The problem is if you develop one, and we've developed some of those in the past, we have them in our back pocket to pull out. When you present that to a person, it's daunting, right? It's going to be a huge spreadsheet, and you don't need to fill out every one of those cells in there. So what's required is the guidance or the intelligence of what you need to fill out in that template. That's one of the things that we're trying to work on, but it's not easy. We find that in terms of investment plan projects, you have a project manager, they have their regular day job. This could be considered part of the regular day job, but really it's like doing a staffing, right? It's something you do on the corner of your desk. and it's not something you do all the time. So great if you do it all the time, you probably have a good handle on it, but a lot of people, it's not something they do on a regular basis, so they really do need some sort of guidance. We try to help out in terms of doing that by creating IP governance. So things have to be gated. So on a project, you need to go, when you have a concept, Mike has seen this recently with this PEP, you got to go and pitch your idea to the senior management first and get a gate approval to sort of proceed, you know, as a proof of concept. You come up with a sort of a broad cost. They say go ahead. You start doing something and refining it, and then you want to get to sort of an implementation stage. You got to come back. You got to get it gated again. So each one of these gates, as you go along, the costs get more refined, and then you keep on going. So we try to put a bit more rigor in through the IP governance process. We're also now working, we have a dedicated IP group that sort of helps shepherd these things along, and now we're working with them to sort of come to grips on that template and the guidance that's required. So it's a work in progress, but those are some of the challenges that we see in terms of investment plan projects. And on the governance front, they're not immune to stop a project in its tracks. You know, it's always sad that you've put a lot of money into something, nobody wants to stop it. But with the governance process, I think they're strong enough to say, okay, we've seen it, you guys have tried, and we're not getting where we want to go, so we'll stop it. So I actually have seen one of those happen recently. Okay, cabinet submissions. This is a fun one, because in my group, I deal with Treasury Board submissions. So all the Treasury Board submissions in Health Canada go through my group. It's a lot of fun, shall we say. We know that, and I'm sure we're not the only department, but in this environment, the last summer, let's say, from summer to now, it's been busy for everyone. Not only you put through lots of TV submissions, you probably put through a lot of memoranda to cabinet as well. So we've had a lot of volume. And one of the things that's sort of increased the workload is the new CFO attestation process. So on each one of those cabinet submissions, the CFO has to do Treasury Board's dirty work and sort of attest that we've seen the cost and we're kind of okay with the costs. And that's, it took a while for people to understand what that was, because in the past, you did a cabinet submission, it came through our way, whether it was an MC or a TV submission, they just expected the CFO to sign off, hold the nose, sign off, get it upstairs, get the deputy sign it, get the minister to sign it, away you go. That's not what happens with the CFO attestation process. So it took a while for people to sort of understand our role there. Definitely with this environment, there's a lot more focus on costs at TV, and they're really focused on FTEs as well. I don't know if many of you work on cabinet submissions, but asking for a new FTE these days, it's tough. I mean, they're literally challenging you on arms and legs. In terms of costs, just to give you an example, we did a submission recently for, it wasn't a large amount of money, for our department. It was a First Nations one, but they were challenging us on the internal service aspect of the submission. And the internal services on that was $55,000. We argued back and forth for days with the TBS analyst to sort of justify $55,000. So that's what it's like these days. On renewing things, we used to consider a renewal of funding straightforward, no problem. We had $50 million in the past. They're going to pass the $50 million now, right? Can't do it anymore. Even if you know that it's been booked in the fiscal framework and you say, we know it's there, they're not buying it. The TV ministers will still say, okay, justify every penny of that $50 million. So it's not as easy as it used to be. And so we've had to sort of abandon some of the things we've done in the past. So I talked a bit about that corporate cost allocation model. And that's what we would take to sort of figure out how much HR would get, how much IT would get, how much guys like me would get. We've thrown that model out the window because number one, it sort of, I won't say it was too much, but in terms of what TV ministers are looking at, they might consider it too much. They are actually comparing departments. So again, on that same submission I talked about a few minutes ago for First Nations, where we talked about $55,000 of internal services, the challenge for us was that was a joint submission with our friends at Aboriginal Affairs. And so what happened there was they were looking at our cost versus their cost. They were going, well, your internal service rate is this percentage, and theirs is that. Of course, they're choosing the lowest one, right? And even though you try and tell them, well, you know, Aboriginal Affairs, they deliver their program mainly through grants and contributions, right? It doesn't take the same level of effort to cut a check for a grant and contribution versus what we have in the same program. We have boots on the ground delivering. Didn't want to hear that. Explain it as many times as you want, wasn't working. Okay. I'll talk a bit more about this CCAM. So the CCAM, the corporate cost allocation model, was developed somewhere around